This is a final video in a short video series where we look at an average retirement plan with 1.7 million in financial assets. Now, why 1.7 million? Well, that was what a recent survey suggested was what the average Canadian believes they need for retirement. Now, 1.7 million is a very big number, so I suspect the real number is quite a bit lower. But in this video, we're going to look at how all of our assumptions come together in the final plan projections. So in the previous videos, we made assumptions for income and expenses, assets and debts, and also CPP and old age security benefits. If you'd like to watch those previous videos, I put a link in the description for this video. Now let's take a look at how all of those assumptions come together to create an average retirement plan with 1.7 million in financial assets. So in the last video, we were talking about CPP and old age security. Now let's take a look at how all of these assumptions roll together in the final plan projections. So we'll go down here to projections. It's going to do all the calculations for us. Now let's take a look at income here. So quite a bit of income. I mean, they are targeting $75,000 a year after tax. So we do have some tax to pay every year, but we can see there's quite a bit of income coming from registered assets, RSPs, non-registered, but I don't see any TFSA, so we're not even dipping into the TFSA. We can already notice that. Now in terms of spending, it's just that $75,000 a year that we saw in the first video, and we're just assuming that all the way throughout retirement. So we're not assuming any sort of dip later in retirement or any extra spending in early retirement, just $75,000 straight across. This is probably something that we could adjust in the future. Now let's see what net worth looks like. So quite good. So what this tells me is that $1.7 million in financial assets is probably more than enough to retire with an average after-tax spending of $75,000 for a couple. So for an average Canadian, $1.7 million is probably much, much too much to target for retirement assets. We can see that their success rate is 100%, which is great. But in the average case, they could have millions of dollars at the end of retirement. Now for fun, let's take a look at how much extra spending we could maybe add to Bill and Louise's plan. So let's say they actually did have $1.7 million. Let's go down here. We're going to add a little bit of extra spending. I don't know, $40,000. And we're going to assume that until, let's assume age 74. So we're going to assume that they live a fairly lavish retirement for the first 10 or so years of retirement. And then mid-70s, they're going to start to scale back. Now, even in their base retirement plan, they had $12,000 a year for travel, and I think it was $12,000 a year in miscellaneous as well. So it's already quite a generous retirement budget, but we're going to add another $40,000 a year just to see what it looks like. So let's recalculate this. And let's take a look at what an extra $40,000 a year looks like. And even then, they still end up with $1 million. My goodness. So success rate has dropped a little bit. So spending $40,000 a year for the first 10 years of retirement, it does add some risk, sequence of returns risk. If they were to keep spending that, regardless of what was happening with their investment portfolio, there's definitely a chance of running out of money. But with $40,000 of extra discretionary spending, there's a lot of flexibility to cut back if they were to face some poor investment returns or high inflation rates. So let's take a look what spending looks like. So that means for the first 10 years of retirement, they're spending $115,000 a year after tax. That then goes down to $75,000 a year from age 75 onward. This still has, like I said, it still has $12,000 a year in miscellaneous, $12,000 a year in travel spending, so still a fairly generous retirement budget. But early in retirement, they're spending $115,000 a year. They still end up with a sizable TFSA in their late 90s. They still have their home value. Their success rate is still quite high. And there could be some room to maybe manage tax here. So a couple years there with a little bit higher tax. We could do a little bit of tax planning to make that better. But in general, a fairly good retirement plan. So if you do have $1.7 million in retirement, you could probably spend quite a bit more than the average. Now let's take this out. Let's look what an average retirement plan looks like. So we're going to clear this override out here and we're going to recalculate. We're going to get back to our original plan. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back to assets. So we're going to change that original number. So rather than having like 2.7 million in assets, let's change this to be a little bit more realistic. So instead of 500, let's assume 350. Let's maybe leave the TFSAs, but let's assume maybe 45,000 in non-registered assets. So let's assume maybe 35,000 in cost base, and that gives us a total of 1.1 million. So let's see what a financial plan with $1.1 million, let's see what that looks like for an average retirement spending, average CPP, and old age security. So let's go back to projections here. It's going to recalculate for us, and we're going to see what 1.1 million looks like. Now this looks a little bit more reasonable. So we're drawing down from registered accounts. Late in retirement, we might need to use TFSAs. Spending is still that 75,000 a year, so that hasn't changed. And net worth now looks a little bit more reasonable. So we're drawing down financial assets throughout retirement. We've got 600,000 still left over in the end. So that's going to help buffer against maybe some poor investment returns, high inflation rates, extra spending for in-home care, long-term care, and late retirement. They still have their home value, and the success rate, 67%. So not the highest. There's a little bit of risk there, sequence of returns risk. But I wonder if we can make that just a little bit better. In this case, I think we might want to think about delaying CPP until age 70. So let's have them draw down a little bit more from registered assets, non-registered in early retirement. And let's just see what this looks like if they were to delay CPP until age 70. And in this case, we'll let it recalculate. Net worth, about the same, a little bit higher. Success rate a little bit better, so longevity risk is reduced. We've got more CPP benefits in the future. Still a little bit of risk of running out of money, so perhaps if they're in those very extreme scenarios, they might need to cut back a little bit on vacation travel spending. But again, we're assuming the same 75,000 all the way throughout retirement. So if anything, they could cut back a little bit in later retirement. So is 1.7 million the right number for retirement assets? I don't think so. I think probably closer to 1.1 million is a good number to aim for. And then again, that's very situational. So nobody is the average. Some people have more CPP and old age security than what we've assumed in this scenario. There could be other factors like a rental property, a vacation property that could be sold in the future or is producing cash flow, is producing income. So everybody's situation is unique, but is 1.7 the right amount for the average retirement plan in Canada? I don't think so. Probably closer to 1.1 million or 1 million or potentially less. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the little bell notification icon so that you get notified when new videos come out. Thanks for watching.